So we're going to talk about a bunch of things, and not all of it has hit yet. But there's a bunch of things that are live that we're going to demo we've got a release candidate for in 1.2.
Right. So many of the things are finished. They are already in master. Some of the things are like we are putting final touches on this stuff, and we want to get the release candidate out as soon as possible. But what you'll see is what we'll have in Angular 1.2, and you can give us feedback on that, and just I hope you like it.
I'm Brad Green. I'm the manager for the AngularJS project at Google, and
I'm Igor Minar. I'm the team lead on that.
Right. Well, let's get going. Let's
see
what we got here.
So where should we start? We have a lot of stuff. So we're just going to bits and pieces.
There's no theme, and we haven't practiced very much, so we're just kind of vomiting it on you guys. Get ready. You guys in the front row, watch out.
We have quite a few demos. Yeah, if you have questions, please ask at the end. We'll be happy to answer, and just go back to code examples and talk about that. Let's talk about Angular 1.2 and how it happened and how community helped us with
so we released Angular 1.0 almost a year ago, in June, actually. So a lot of you have been with the project. So actually, how many people are new here? Okay, good. Thanks for coming. A lot of folks have been with us since 1.0. Matter of fact, there's a lot of contributors. We wanted to thank all of you. Here's the list in 3-point font of all the people who have contributed since 1.0. There's 248 folks who are not on the Angular project who have actually added code to Angular.
Thank you so much, everybody. Like, you really shaped what Angular 1.2 is. When we set out on the journey of building 1.2, we had a few features that we wanted to add, but it was really community that helped to shape what Angular 1.2 ended up being. So thank you for that.
Woohoo! Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, one of the most requested features has been the ability to do animations. And animations hasn't been easy. And Igor, you want to talk about why?
Right. So with Angular, everything is very declarative. And there's very little DOM manipulation you need to do. But if you happen to play with CSS transitions or CSS animations, you realize that there's quite a bit of manual work you have to do to make these animations possible in the browser using the CSS, or if you don't even have CSS, using JavaScript fallbacks or animations. So we thought quite a bit, how could we preserve the declarative nature of Angular and Angular templates, and at the same time make animations possible? Because often we see in applications that the presentation logic and the business logic has to mix in order to make animations possible. And if you follow Angular if you have been following Angular for quite a bit, we really feel strongly about not mixing or polluting business logic with presentation logic stuff. So here's what we came up with. We came up with a new directive called ng-animate, which collaborates with a service called $animator. And with this directive, you can declaratively control animations. Angular will do most of the grunt work. These animations work with CSS transitions and animations. We also give you option to do JavaScript fallback if you have to. But what we see out there is that there is quite a bit of uptake for like CSS animation libraries. And we thought it would be great if we could just leverage these. So instead of you having to write your animations over and over again, what if you were just able to take GreenSock or many other awesome CSS animation libraries and just use them in your applications? And this is what we did. So
Igor's going to do a good demo, but I should say we're actually leading off with a feature here that was done not on the Angular team, or partially on the Angular team. So Matthias Niemela, one of our main contributors, actually started and did a lot of the work on this.
Right. So Matthias actually created a demo to just show off how powerful this feature is. And he took the Build with Angular site and just rethought it. What would this site look like if we had animations and if we could just animate many of the things that happen? So let's take a look. We have just a list of projects. So before I do this, Build with Angular is just a list of Angular projects, and you can just drill down and see what has been built with Angular. And what Matthias did is just made it look really hot. So you click on stuff, and there are transitions that happen. The things just animate in and out. It looks really nice. Let's look at some. Yeah. We're going to show you actually how this works internally, not on this application, but on simple examples. So you'll get to see. But the important thing is that we actually not only build this ng-animate, but we also made it work with ng-view, ng-repeat, and many other built-in directives that do this changing of the DOM structure that often needs to be animated.
We'll see examples of each of those.
Yeah.
Okay, so right now what you can do is you can animate DOM state transitions. You can animate when DOM elements come into and out of existence.
For example, repeater shrinking or expanding, or ng-view switching from one template to the other.
Right, we'll see some examples of those. The next thing we're working on, the next thing that Matthias and Mishko are working on, are the ability to animate CSS transitions, where I add or remove a CSS class. So you can do things without DOM state changes.
So you don't even need to destroy a DOM in order to bring animation to your application. It's enough to just add a class, and you can make things zoom in or zoom out. It's going to give you a lot more flexibility, and this is something that's going to come after 1.2. The other topic I want to talk about is a little bit boring. It's $HTTP. How many of you are not familiar with $HTTP?
Yeah, a couple of us. So this is actually,
I see like one hand. So $HTTP is really just a wrapper around the XHR object in the browser, and it just makes it much easier to make calls to the server and make HTTP requests. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because HTTP is so important that we see it being used in many of the components that make Angular. And any kind of enhancements to this very core service have impact on the rest of the Angular. So some of the things that we did, we now allow custom types, custom response types. So you can send blobs over the network, for example. We have support for authentication, so you can use with the credentials header to just do authentication on the HTTP level. We allow you to customize a cross-request forgery configuration, so this becomes much more flexible. Many of you ask for aborting requests, so now you can abort requests. And my favorite feature is around interceptors. We had interceptors in Angular before, and these were response interceptors. And what response interceptors allow you to do is just intercept the response and do something with it. Well, many of you asked, what if I want to intercept the request as well? And there was a feature request, hey, let's just add request interceptors. We thought about this and like, that sounds good, but it would be much better if we had around interceptors, where in one go, you can just intercept both the request and response. And this is what we did. I'm not going to show you a demo. I have a link to the documentation. But what is this great for? This allows you to really abstract away authentication from your application, do any kind of async request and response transformations, and also do transparent error recovery. And when I say transparent, let's take an example of your application makes a request to the server, but as the request was being made, the authentication, the authentication session of the user expired. And now the server just responds with, hey, user is not logged in anymore. Well, what you can do now is you can just intercept this response. You can show up a logging dialog to the user, have the user log in, reestablish the session, and then continue with the original request where it left off. And the rest of the application doesn't even know that there was any kind of authentication problem. You can learn more about this in the documentation.
By the way, we'll give you a link to this entire slide deck. There are a lot of documentation, all those things. So we'll make sure you've got a link to that at the end of the presentation. Good. $resource, another feature for communicating with servers, but RESTful communication style.
$resource is a higher level service on top of HTTP. It's a RESTful client generator. It's a way how you can build RESTful clients in your application in a very simple. What we added was more configuration options, configuring all of the HTTP low-level stuff like headers and reconfiguring URLs. We also added support for resource interceptors, so you can create a resource-specific interceptor which allows you to abstract more of the underlying HTTP stuff from your application and just keep it in the resource definition. And most importantly, we enhance the APIs with promises. This is something that people ask for a long time. And let me show you a demo of that, actually. So we have a very simple application. You probably know this application from our homepage. It's a list of popular frameworks and libraries, and we fetch this list from a server. So let's see how we built this. So in this application, we're using a little bit unrelated feature, route provider, and resolve property on the route provider. Let me wrap this font. Okay. And if you ever try to use resolve property, it makes the application look much better. The transitions from one view to another are much more seamless and better. But you have to deal with promises. And because the $resource didn't support promises, there was a lot of work you had to do. So for example, just to fetch a simple project list, you had to take $Q, you had to create deferred object, you had to make a query to the project, and then you had to resolve the deferred with the response, and at the end you had to return the promise. And this is like nobody would do this because it's just too much stuff you have to know. Well, now, because $resource supports promises, what you can do is just say, give me projects, query them, and return the promise. And what this will do is, in our controller, then we can just say, this controller needs projects. And we can then bind the projects to the scope, or in this case, we're using the new controller as syntax that we'll talk about soon. And there is no asynchronous stuff happening in the controller constructor. This simplifies the code and makes things much better.
Awesome.
Let's talk about $route and ngView. $route and ngView is how you can do routing in Angular applications. And one of the very small change that we did, but has a big impact, we separated all the code for routing into a separate module. Just like we have ngResource, we now have ngRoute. We did this for several reasons. One of them is that many applications, especially the mobile ones, they don't use the $route to control routing. And they unfortunately were forced to pull the bytes that $route and ngView represent in the AngularJS minified file. So by separating this out, only those applications that need it will include it, and those that don't will not. But also, we see that in the community, there's a lot of interest in creating better routing. And there are projects that tried this. And one of my favorite ones is Angular UI Router. If you ever tried that, it looks really awesome.
We heard about that earlier tonight, actually.
Oh, you did? OK. I wasn't here, sorry. Yeah, it's a state-based routing, state machine-based routing in Angular applications. And by extracting route into a separate module, we give space to alternative implementations. And I think this is good because I don't think that the Angular team should be the only one deciding, like, this is the right way to do something. And by giving more freedom to the community to innovate, we can make Angular better together. Another feature that we added to existing routing is catch-all parameter matching.
Wildcards.
Basically wildcards. It's just another way how it's extending the syntax, how you can match URLs against the patterns against URLs. And it's something that many people wanted for the applications. And animation support, just like we mentioned NGAnimate. NGAnimate is now deeply integrated with Route. And let me show you a quick demo of that. So we have the same application that we saw before, but the biggest difference now is that the views will transition in as animation. And also, if I switch to a different view, that there is this animation happening. And all I had to do to make this happen, let's open the template. I had to specify on ngView that we have NGAnimate. There's an animation that is bound to this view directive. And the animation is a view slide animation. This is an expression, so it actually is a model that is controlled by the application. And if you look at the routing on this application, we'll see that we define, if I can find it quickly. Oh, down here. We define new listener on the route change success event. So whenever a route change happens, we redefine what view slide animation is. And view slide animation will have two properties, enter and leave. These properties then point to classes that control the animations. And this way, we can create different animation. So animating to the right when we are transitioning from the details view to the master view, and animating to the left when we are going from the master view into the details view. ng-repeat.
Keep talking, man.
ng-repeat. ng-repeat is a directive that is used almost in every application. And again, we thought it has to support animation support, and you told us that it has to. So takes additional ng-animate attribute as a collaborator. And again, just like we saw with ng-view, through ng-animate, you can just define what kind of animation should be applied for elements coming in and out of the DOM. So in this case, we're just saying that we're using slide animation. And notice that we're using slide as a literal string because ng-animate takes expressions. So slide, in this case, is defined in a CSS. And I can show you that. There's a bunch of classes that start with slide. So there's like slide enter, slide enter active, slide leave, slide left, right, and all of these. These are all just reusable CSS animations that you can use over and over in the application. And once you build them, then you can use them with different components. But most importantly, when I start typing in my list, you just see that these animations are being applied to the elements coming in or coming out of the DOM. You don't have to think about, oh, how long do I need to keep this element in the DOM until the animation is finished and then remove it. Angular takes care of all of this. All you have to specify is which animation to apply, and then you just have to, using conventions, specify the animation using CSS.
That's right. If you change your animation timing in the CSS, we actually know that, and we delay the DOM removal the right amount.
Yep. The next feature, ng-repeat multi-element repeater. We heard that it was impossible to build a DOM-based templating language that would allow possibility of repeating over multiple DOM elements, or any kind of like constructs where multiple DOM elements would be grouped, and it would just work everywhere. And it's true that it's hard because there are many cases where you just can't create like artificial nodes to just group elements. For example, tables and lists are a good example of that. The same applies to options and so on. So we came up with a very interesting solution where we allow you to just specify dash start and dash end. And this actually applies to any kind of directive that you want to use. This is not just ng-repeater specific. You can use this with ng-switch, but the most common use case will be ng-repeat. So with ng-repeat start, you can just say, this is the start of the repetition. And with ng-repeat end, you mark the last node. And everything in between is part of the DOM fragment that needs to be cloned every time we expand it for a new model in the collection. So in this case, we are iterating over books. We're using DT, and DT's defining a definition for these books. And DT and DD are very interesting because they are not even like nested. They are just sibling elements, and they're really hard to deal with, especially if you have a templating language. But with these, you can easily just mark them with ng-repeat start, and it just works. So we have an example. The code is pretty much the same as what we saw. And you see that they render properly. And if I hit my giant add more button, it will add more stuff to the DOM. In this case, in this way, you can just iterate over table rows, table columns, lists, whatever you have. Next one, again, ng-repeat, track by. Right?
Yeah, so we have this awesome property where Angular repeaters, they bind to the references in collection.
We keep an association between the model instance and the node. And that way, for example, if you have a collection, you just reorder this collection, we will just reorder the DOM nodes in the DOM.
And this works out really well until in some cases where you might reload data from the server, but you can't guarantee that you're going to use the same collection.
Right.
So what do we do?
So we're introducing track extension to the ng repeat expression. And what you can say, you can specify what is the property that should be used to keep the association between the DOM node and the model. So in this case, a very simple example where we are repeating over students, and we're just printing their names and scores. But we're saying that use the student ID to track the association between the DOM node that is going to be displayed to the user and the actual model instance. And let me show you this code, and it's going to make a lot more sense. So the template looks just like what we had. We have ng repeat, and it says track by student ID. And we are printing student name and student score. But when I hit the Make Smarter button,
wish I had that button.
we're actually going to increase the scores of all the students. Like this example is a little convoluted, but or contrived. But what we are doing is whenever the button is hit, we're going to call this function, and this function will reset the model to a new array with new objects. But these objects have the same IDs as the ones before. So we're not dealing with the same objects as the ones that were originally used to render the repeater. But these new objects have the same IDs.
And so they'll render in the same order. That's the important part.
Yep. And if, oopsie, I want to show you, if I go to the console and actually inspect this element, you see that once the button is hit, the binding is just updated. And if we distracted the DOM, like the position in my web inspector would disappear because the DOM node would be gone. You can play with this, and there's actually a way to remove the track by and see how the DOM nodes get destroyed. You'll see that. This is really useful, especially in bigger applications where the models are more complex, and that's where you'll be able to take advantage of this feature. Controller S.
We actually demoed this at Google I/O, but it's good to revisit this.
Okay. So why are we doing this?
So there's sometimes in where I write my controllers, I'd like to, maybe I don't even need the scope. I want a simpler syntax for the way I define my controllers.
Or maybe you're just getting started with Angular, and you don't even want to know what a scope is.
Sure. It's a good example.
Right. So we thought about how we could simplify the controllers even further. And one of the ways that we came up, one of the ways we came up with was this controller syntax, which allows you to define the name of the instance of the controller, which you can then use to reference in your templates. So in this case, we're defining a new controller, demo controller, and we're saying this controller, the instance of the controller, is going to be known within this scope, within the scope of this body as demo. And then we can just say demo.students, and we're going to take the property of the controller students and use it in the repeater. And really, the controller then can just say this.students and assign the model to this. So in your controller, you don't need to be dealing with scope. This simplifies the controller further. If you do need scope, you can always have it injected. So we are not taking the scope away. So if you need to use $watch or other APIs on scope, you still have the power. But we see that this simplifies the code. And from the feedback we got from you guys, it seems that you like this feature as well.
Actually, it's kind of polarizing, I think. Like, some people love it, some hate it.
I see that like the hardcore Angular people, they're like, give me my scope back. Like I don't want to give it up. But most of the people that I talk to, they really like the syntax.
Absolutely, and it's optional. No one has to use it if you don't like it.
ng-if. This is actually something that was already implemented in Angular UI project, and people liked it so much that they just threatened us and said that if we don't include it in the core, they'll just leave Angular.
We gave up.
We gave up. But for a while, we thought that this feature was not necessary, but then when we thought about it, the way we implemented it, it allows new things to be done in Angular that were not possible before. So what ngIf is, it allows you to conditionally enable components in your application or even template fragments in your application. So in this example that I have right here, we have a clock component that we're using, and we are saying that this clock component should be enabled only if this particular model is true.
Actually, this is important because sometimes your CSS can get screwed up if you've got DOM nodes that exist when you don't want them to.
Yeah, if you're using ng-show, ng-hide, there are some cases when the CSS selectors might match a wrong thing, like with nth child and stuff like that. So ng-show and ng-hide might not always give you what you need. And ngIf solves this problem. So the demo. All right, here. So we have a small application. Just as I said, I have this clock component, and what it does, it just prints the current time and will refresh it every second. I'm going to also open console because the component will just log every time it's instantiated, and also every time it will refresh the timer. So when I hit the button, the clock will be, the model that controls ngIf will be set to true. And what we'll see is that the clock appears here, and we also see that we actually instantiated new instance of the clock. And then we see how it's refreshing time, and every time it logs, it also refreshes the view. And if I hit the button again, I'm going to disable this clock. And we see that it stopped refreshing. So we actually completely killed that clock component. There is no background work happening. And when I hit the button again, it will actually recreate. I don't know if you can see it because the font is quite small. But we recreated a new instance of the clock, and that is now used to display this time. So ngIf, again, just gives you more possibilities that were harder to do before, and this is one of them.
All right, so we've got this expression language in Angular that inside your templates, you can do some powerful JavaScript-like things that it's not quite JavaScript. But it's not complete, so we've added a couple things.
Right, so we are adding some operators, especially the one, we're adding 3 operators. We are adding operators for strict equality and strict non-equality, and also a ternary operator. This allows you to write expressions that are a little more precise than what you could do before. So for example, if you have ngIf and you want to say, show this only if the user is logged in, and the login has to be true, where true is a string literal, and not just Boolean or truthy, then you can use triple equals. And a ternary operator is useful, for example, in an ng class, where you just want to say, depending on this model, use this like user class or anonymous class on this element, and just makes the code easier to read and understand.
All right. Again, we demoed some other cool stuff at Google I/O, but I think it bears repeating. We want to invest more in mobile. A lot of people have built a lot of mobile apps using Angular without us doing anything special to support it. There's a bunch of third-party libraries that support mobile, but we thought some things deserve to be in the core.
Yeah, so we are introducing a new model, new module that we call ngMobile right now, but I think we'll rename it to ngTouch just before the release, because it really contains only touch-specific stuff. And now with like Pixel and other devices, it's not just cell phones and tablets that have touch capabilities. But let's look at some of the stuff that you can do. So ngClick is a directive that you know, and it's being used to capture mouse clicks. But we extended it so that if you include this module, it will just become a tab enabled. So then on devices that allow you to do gestures and have touch support, tab will just work on any of the ngClick element. We're also adding ngSwipe. so you can have swipe gestures in your application. And again, we made this work with mouse. So if your user is using mouse and makes the swipe gesture with the mouse, it's just going to work. We have some demos, and actually Jeff, back over there, he built a really sweet application that shows off some of these touch capabilities. It's a very simple feed reader that allows you to specify your own feeds, and it's just going to pull them in. But if you have a touch-enabled device and you just click on any of the articles, you see some animation and transitions. But also, you can do stuff like swipe to the side. So we have carousel, and again, like tapping and usual touch stuff just works. You can check this application, and I think he also recorded a screencast, so he will demonstrate some of these features in the screencast. Security. Who cares about security here?
So
only like 10 hands? Come on.
Well, folks, more should maybe. I mean, we're lucky to be at Google.
Well, maybe they shouldn't. Maybe we should.
Well, I think everyone should. I mean, we're lucky to be at Google. We've, from the beginning, been able to review Angular with the Google security experts. And we do this on a regular basis. And we've just gone through the latest, like, most forward-thinking about browsers and web security with them. We've got some things to add.
Right. So with 1.2, we're adding CSP auto detection. How many of you are familiar with CSP? Content security policy? Really just like 3 hands. When you go home, search content security policy. It's this new feature in browsers that allows you to control what your application is allowed to do. And by using content security policy, you can greatly minimize risks of XSS or any kind of attacks that could otherwise easily happen in your application. And you do this at the browser level, so you don't need to rely on any of the code or libraries to do this stuff. So what we are doing with CSP is CSP requires certain things that certain configuration in Angular. Like one thing that you need to do is specify ngCSP to enable the CSP mode. But what we did is with 1.2, if the browser can tell us that CSP is enabled, we will just enable this mode by default, and Angular will just work. You don't need to worry about it. The other thing that we did is automatic contextual escaping for images and URLs or links. This is something that most of you really don't need to worry about, but there are some very weird cases when people could exploit the application using images and links. What we did is we added another layer of sanitization into Angular that will just prevent any of these attacks by default. We did also just more security hardening. Like one thing that amazes me is that like we're getting to a stage where we are hardening things that are like so obscure that we can't even like easily talk about it, because it's like you have to do this and that and that and that, and maybe then there will be exploit. So like exploiting Angular becomes so dramatically hard that it about the security in Angular. What about error messages, however?
Yeah, so so right now when I get an error message in Angular, what do I get, Igor?
Maybe something unquote error, no module ng resource.
So, and what do I do? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Maybe search Stack Overflow.
Maybe, yeah.
Could I have something better, maybe? Something more actionable?
Right, so we thought about this for quite a bit, and this is one of the things where the answer is not trivial, because we want to provide you good error messages, but at the same time, but by giving you more text, we're increasing the size of Angular. And as we know quite well from your feedback, you're really sensitive about the size of Angular. You don't want Angular to be bloated to like, 50 or 100 kilobytes. And this is something that we really strive not to do. So we thought, how could we just give you a good error message? For example, like module ng resource is not available. Maybe you misspelled it or you forgot to load it, and even provide you a link to a page where you can read more about this stuff. And do this in a way that would not bloat Angular. And I think we came up with a pretty good solution, which is If you're using non-minified Angular, you'll get these really nice error messages. But if you use Angular in production, the minified build, we're actually going to strip all the lengthy strings from Angular file and just give you error code and a link. And you can just follow the link, and the link will reconstruct the original message, so you can actually read it, what it was, and take some action on it. This reduces the size of Angular by, I think, somewhere between 5 and 10%. So it's very nice to see that this is happening.
Speaking of documentation, we've heard Angular's good, but the docs are maybe unbelievably horrible, and people mean that in the worst possible way.
I don't know. I meet people and they're like, "Your docs are so awesome." I'm like, "Really?" And then like,
there's some interesting things in it. Like, for example, in the concept section, there are maybe 5 different pages that could be construed as the overview. We took a survey. Let's go to the next page. We took a survey of like thought should be fixed, and we want to do this in a very deep way. And the guy who did the animation stuff, who runs the blog Year of Matthias, is working on a number of improvements. And this will be rolling out over the next several months. But we wanted to kind of intersperse things that existing developers would like to see with things for newbies, things for experts, newbies, et cetera, so everybody gets some love. And we're going to start off with a bunch of things around, first of all, navigation, search, and just the general API organization. So some folks said they wanted to be able to jump to previous versions. And so now we'll have a way you can just click the drop-down and jump to whatever version you want, go back in time, whatever version you happen to be using on your application. For search, we already have a couple search boxes here. But what we wanted to do is make sure that the one on the top of the APIs is mainly just a filter, and the one in the upper-hand corner, we're going to turn into a full-site search that works in real time in memory. So you don't even have to be connected to the internet if you download one page. So we'll search across the APIs, the guide, the tutorial, and any other pieces of the Angular site to find references to whatever you type and allow you to get there. And then as well, in terms of the API organization, we're going to do some very deep things. So for example, here's the select documentation. And if we scroll down a little bit, we notice that, OK, we've got some nicer tables now, some ways to declare the type so you can see what it is. But there, if you look in the current documentation, you see a lot of very big content. And so we have a way to collapse this. So I can easily see what's the main concept. And if I click on that expression, can be set in any one of these, we get a nice drop over with more additional detail.
Right. So for example, ng options, it's a beast of its own. Like there is quite a lot that you can do with it, and just having all the documentation in the select page just was polluting that page. So we just pull it out into this side page.
Next thing we're working on, and this is very early to show it off, but we have all of these concepts pages we wanted to pull together into a really good explanation. And we have this tutorial, and the tutorial is, I think, awesome. Igor worked on it. It requires you to actually like leave the site and download some things and get going in command line. We wanted to merge these things together into a full online experience, where at the top I can read about all the cool concepts in Angular, and then at the bottom put them to use. And immediately we can actually see what looks like an editor and a browser. And if I change anything in it, and go ahead and maybe add some text here and click, we've got some things to work out. But it actually behaves like a browser. We also have tests, so you can actually see how we write tests, end-to-end tests, and actually see them run in the test tab. So this is going to be a 5-step tutorial. It'll be a great introduction for new folks coming to Angular. And we really want folks to, from those 5 steps, understand all the basics.
So if you have a colleague that is starting with Angular, you can just point him to this tutorial, and he'll be able to experiment with Angular in the browser without even doing anything on the machine. But if he wants to check out all the code and work with it locally, he'll have an option to do that as well.
Very excited about that bit.
OK.
All right. OK, so what's next? What's next, Igor?
Well, this was Angular 1.2, or stuff that is coming very, very soon, and you'll be able to use it. Starting to think, what's beyond 1.2? And we wanted to give you some overview of this so that you also have an idea of what to expect after 1.2.
Right. So most of the folks who use Angular, they use it with JavaScript. Of course, Angular is written in JavaScript. We've also seen folks use a lot of other languages. They've used CoffeeScript, of course, very popular. TypeScript, which adds types, and it's very close to the ECMAScript 6 type standard. Even folks doing what might be construed as crazier stuff, but very cool stuff in the ClojureScript world. There was one scripting language that we wanted to add support for that we didn't think the community could do. And we actually have a big project using it at Google. So we're going to add support for the Dart language. Who knows what Dart is? A couple folks. Oh, a lot of folks. OK, good. So we could go to their site. If you're not familiar, Dart adds optional types to JavaScript. They're working heavily on performance. This is the same team who built the V8 JavaScript engine at Google. So they know a thing or two about performance. Adds a lot of other nice, interesting bits, like they have promises built into the language itself. So what we're doing, and let's go back to the slides, is we're building a version of Angular that's a port onto Dart. They're not going to share any of the same code, though we want to keep them conceptually similar so that they feel like the same thing. If I know the JavaScript version, I should be able to work on the Dart version very easily. We think the templates will probably always be the same, and we want to align various things. But like I mentioned, Dart already has promises. We didn't need to port that bit. So there will be differences. We're not going to commit to the actual code being the same. So where we are right now, we have a bunch of the core components, like compiler, scope, expressions, already working in Dart. We've done some basic directives like ngbind and ngrepeat. And we're porting other critical bits like dependency injection and routes. And you can start seeing some of these pieces. We've also made testing easy. We've made Karma, the test runner, work with Dart. So these pieces are coming together. The status is it's not really ready to play with unless you're really desperate. But we are using this on an internal project. Or we're actually going to start using an internal project next week. So it'll start coming together quickly.
Right. And just to make this absolutely clear, we're not dropping the JavaScript support. We love JavaScript. We are very passionate about JavaScript. This is just another option for people who like Dart and would like to be using Dart. There are projects at Google that are being built with Dart, and they want Angular. But there are also projects that are built with JavaScript at Google, and they want Angular. So we thought about how could we help both of these groups of people at Google. And the easiest answer that we could come up with was, let's just port Angular to Dart. Let's expand the Angular team. The original Angular JavaScript was really built with just 3 guys.
That's right.
So now we have quite a bit more than that.
We have, 6 full-time folks and 3 folks externally doing full-time work.
Right. So we expanded the team. We invested into the Angular team, and we're going to both Angular in Dart and JavaScript. And it's going to be your option to choose which one you want to use.
That's right. So let's talk about what's coming down for the full Angular. We might have to drop JS. I don't know.
Right. So when we're talking about Angular next, it's really JavaScript and Dart. The overall theme is the same for both. It's going to be based on standards. When we started with Angular 4 years ago, many of the standards that are in browsers today, or many of the APIs that are in browsers today, didn't exist. Some of examples of those are Object Observe, which allows us to do very performant checking of the model mutations. The other one is the mutation observers, just a way of the browser telling us, hey, there was a new element added to the page or to the document. Template element, an awesome element that allows us to avoid many of the hacks that we have to do with Angular today, because we don't have an element that would be
good placeholder for.
Yeah, a good placeholder and would not cause like script loading or image loading and any kind of stuff. Shadow DOM is like probably the best API of all of these. It allows you to isolate DOM fragments and like create real, true encapsulation within DOM. All of these are really come under the umbrella of web components and model-driven views, and these are the standards that we want to build the next Angular on top of. This is going to come after Angular 1.2, and it's going to take some time, but this is the direction that we are taking. You might wonder about backwards compatibility. With existing browsers, we're going to use the strategy of polyfills and transpilers. This is something that's becoming more and more popular, and I think it's the best option how to push the web forward. And this is what we are going to do.
Right. So Angular right now is mostly one big piece in the core, but we've started to split some things out, right?
Right. So Angular is, when we started with Angular, there was just one thing. There was AngularJS. And it was composed of many different pieces, like $location, $compile, $parse, and many other services that you use probably on a daily basis. But there are also like filters and repeaters and directives and many, many other pieces. And as we were building Angular and adding more features, and as you were asking for more features, we actually outgrown AngularJS, and we started building like these modules, Angular Resource, Angular Route, Angular Sanitize, and many others. This strategy has worked for some time, but we feel like the core is still becoming bigger and bigger. And really the best way to deal with this thing is, what if we just took all these pieces and just created them as separate projects? So we could just have location, which is really just a generic wrapper around navigation within the browser. HTTP is just a wrapper around HTTP. It doesn't really, there's very little that is Angular specific about this thing. And if you wanted to, you should be able to use these pieces outside of Angular ecosystem. And I think this is a very good thing. Let's take dependency injection as an example. Like many people want to use dependency injection after they saw it work in Angular, and they want to use it in Node, but they can't use the one in Angular because it's part of Angular and like you can't rip it out. Well, we'll rip it out for you. We'll just take it out. We'll make it completely agnostic of Angular, and you can use it in Angular or you can use it in your Node application if you choose to. This allows you to build Angular that you need and have only those pieces that you need in your application. And it also allows you to just take the pieces of Angular and mix them with other pieces of different frameworks or different platforms like Node.
What if I want the old Angular?
If you want the old Angular, we're going to create it for you. It's just going to be a meta module that just has dependencies on all these small modules, really. So we'll use tools like Bower and Grunt to just make it easy and very seamless to just pulling the pieces you need and build the Angular that you need. We also hope that by doing this, we're going to decentralize the project. We already see that it's really hard for us to scale. Like if you look at our issue tracker or pull requests, it's becoming quite hard to just keep organizing the project in the way we've been doing. By decentralizing Angular into these smaller projects, this is going to become much easier. It's going to be much easier to delegate responsibilities. But again, you still have the good old Angular. Like when you look at the micro frameworks, like micro libraries, this is not a new approach. It's just many people have tried it from the other end, where they tried to build many small pieces and then have them work together. But doing it in this way, you end up like, when you try to combine all these small pieces, it's really hard. But what we are doing, we're taking something that works together really well, we're just going to break it up into pieces that can or might not live on its own. So it's very easy to just create Angular back into a single piece. And the last thing.
One more piece, yes.
Yeah. The last thing.
Something near and dear to our hearts, testing.
Yeah, we really care about testing. You probably know all about that. And while we are super happy about the state of unit testing and Angular applications, we are not as excited about how the end-to-end testing in Angular applications has turned out. We have a solution called the Angular Scenario Runner, which has some really awesome features. And one of the best one is this tight integration between the test runner and the application framework, so that the two can just collaborate and can make writing tests easy. But the current implementation of the Angular Scenario Runner is based on iframes, and there are many things that you can do with this approach. For example, it's very hard to simulate touch events or any kind of like native events that happen in the browser. So we're creating a new project called Protractor.
It's to find the right angle.
Yeah, to find the right angles in your application. Julie is an awesome engineer from Seattle who's working on this project, and this project is already out there on GitHub. It's in a reasonably good shape. We're actually starting to migrate all of our end-to-end tests that we use to test Angular to use Protractor. So it's definitely ready to be checked out, and Julie's looking for more feedback.
We'll have Julie come down here for a meetup at some point in the future.
Right. So what is Protractor? Protractor has the same great integration with Angular. So many of the things, like if you're dealing with Selenium tests, you have to do this polling, or you have to check is my application ready for assertions. This just doesn't exist in Protractor, just like it didn't exist in Scenario Runner. But it's based on WebDriver. WebDriver is this project that allows you to have full control over the browser. It allows you to emulate events, control the screen size, and many things that you just couldn't do using iframes. This is definitely a project you should check out. And we're going to be slowly migrating all of our tutorials and all of our end-to-end test suites to the solution.
Okay, cool. Here's the link to the slides, and we will take questions. So Ken and Mishko have, where's Mishko? Slacking off? Oh,
yeah,
there he is.
can you just come in the middle?
So if you could guys come to the aisle, just ask. So we'll ask you to come up to the aisles, use your feet to walk, and Mishko or Ken will hand you a mic. Come on up, anybody. Form a line, both aisles. Maybe over here first. Yeah, sure.
So I'm interested in the browsers that you tested against with the transitions and stuff with the animation.
Mishko, maybe you can.
So this is just a standard continuous integration suite we have, and we test. What do we test?
IE8 and newer, Firefox,
9, 10?
Chrome. Yeah.
Safari, Firefox, Chrome.
Mobile browsers, Android browser. But really what we are just doing, the animations themselves are defined through CSS or JavaScript. This is not part of Angular, and this is the part where you need to make sure that these things are cross-browser compatible. But again, you can leverage existing CSS libraries to do this stuff.
Cool, over here.
Hello? Oh, there we go. So I'm just wondering, you guys introduced a lot of stuff today, especially obviously Angular 1.2, but also the revamped website. I'm sort of in the middle of teaching some people at my company how to use Angular, and I was just wondering that the new website with the new search and all that. I know Angular 1.2. I don't know when the deadline release date for that be, but the website itself would be super great to have really soon.
Okay, yeah.
With the release candidate, you'll get most of the documentation enhancements. The site is already, if you go to like code AngularJS and look for the documentation that is specific to the latest unstable releases, you'll see most of these enhancements already out there. And we're just merging these changes as they are ready.
The 5-step tutorial is going to take a couple more weeks. Yeah.
So first of all, huge thanks for actually revamping the documentation.
All right, okay.
The question that I actually have for you is, you guys mentioned that there's going to be like different versions of Angular that you could swap in and out for like better error messages. And like we're using the CDN hosted version, and will the version that you can swap out with the error messages, will that also actually be CDN hosted available?
Yeah, so this is just the minified version will have those little error messages with a link to the doc, and the unminified version will have the full error messages. Same stuff you already use.
Yeah. One thing I see quite a bit, which is a little bit unfortunate on JSField or Plunker, people are building all these examples with minified version of Angular, and then when you look at the console and like they send us, oh, there is this bug, and I started bugging, and like, I'm getting very weird stack traces, and it's because you're using a minified version of Angular. Like whenever you develop, you really should be developing with a non-minified version of Angular. It makes it so much better.
Cool. Over here.
One of the things we always run into, I think you've kind of partially addressed now, is that when using, well, you always had resolves. So like using a resolve to load your data before your controller does. But we always have that problem with directives. So directives try to like render and the data is not there yet. So we end up having to like do a bunch of watches and wait for promises to resolve, then render the data in the directive. So I'm thinking now, is the proper way to do that using an ng-if on the directive to say that when the promise is resolved, then render the directive?
It's one of the use cases. You could use it definitely in that way. But if you have access to the promise, like the easiest thing is just wait for the promise to be resolved and then do stuff.
Second question is about lazy loading of like modules. Is that in the plan?
This is a very good question, and actually something we didn't have time to discuss. There is a project that is actually in works with these awesome guys from Utah. They are integrating require.js with Angular so that it just works. We know how to do it now, and we're going to get rid of Angular modules in case you're using require.js. This is something we are trying to backport to existing Angular, and I think that will just work. And we should have an update on this very soon. So just watch out on Twitter or Google+, and we'll give you an update.
Yeah. Over here, yeah.
I know you mentioned using Bower and Grunt to manage Angular modules moving forward. I was wondering if you're going to expand on the Yeoman Angular integration so far and what the future of that would be.
Yes, so Brian Ford is the guy who created the existing generators. He's joining our team next week. I can't wait. So he's going to be working full-time with us starting next week, and Yeoman and Bower and Grunt and all these things. This is something he's really passionate about, and he's going to keep on enhancing those. Is there something particular you would like to see, or?
No, I like the direction it's going.
Yeah.
Cool.
Definitely, we think that Yeoman is a cool project, and it helps a lot developers get started, so we want to invest more in that.
Yeah.
Thanks for the great work on Angular. There's another Google JavaScript framework called Polymer, and it seems like it has a lot of commonalities with Angular. I was wondering if you could discuss differences and similarities.
Yeah.
So Polymer is a project that really pushes the web forward. It's a project that tries to imagine what the standard APIs, or tries to polyfill existing standards that are not implemented yet in browsers, and use those and provide a way for developers to start using these APIs before they are implemented in browsers. As you mentioned, yes, there is some polyfill. There is some overlap. We are working with Polymer team. We are all passionate about the future of the web components and model-driven views, and we just want to work together on making this better.
Over here, Dean.
Yeah, I was wondering with the new doc site, there's a feature I've been requesting for a while now. Is it going to be URL searchable so I can use Google Chrome search browser engines and put it into my IRC bot?
It's a good question. I don't think it's on our list, but it could be.
Isn't it already URL searchable?
No, I want to type a search query into the URL, like Q equals some random suggestion results. Right now I have to know the URL of every page. Do you want me to repeat it?
Yeah, go ahead and repeat it, and I'll chat with Matthias about it, yeah.
I'd like to be able to have like Q equals some random search query, and it gives me search results. Right now I have to know every specific URL, and it'd be nice if I can just, do Google site search. Or
I gotcha.
Okay.
Good request.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah,
request.
we could totally do that.
Hey, thanks, guys. Two newbie questions, actually. ng-if, so that'll actually remove the DOM element?
That's right.
Cool.
Versus ng show or hide, which just
right, that
changes
was a
the
big
CSS
one.
on it.
We had to actually delete it, otherwise people could still see and act on it. So thank you for that. And $HTTP synchronous, I can do that, or do I have to do the $Q and everything?
$HTTP is asynchronous. Asynchronous, yeah.
Right. I'm just wondering if I can do synchronous,
No, you can't, and you really should never do that.
Kind of similar to the question about Polymer a second ago. Are you going to be doing polyfills for things like Shadow DOM in Angular 2?
Our team already built most of these polyfills.
Right.
We're gonna use those, and we're gonna help them enhance them if needed. Yeah, this is gonna be really a collaboration between the two teams.
And so you'll bake it into Angular 2?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're already getting requests to use their things.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're actually going to share some of the stuff. Like, it's really hard to tell what's going to happen in the long term, but we already see signs of like sharing stuff between the two projects, and I think that's the right direction to go. Like, we're going to take their polyfills, they like our syntax and our parser, the expression parser. So we're working on many of these things and see, how we can just trade things or work on things together. And like breaking up Angular into small pieces will even help in this.
Yeah, over here.
Hi, my question is for Angular on Dart. Will you have any migration path if I have existing project on Angular on JS, and if I want to migrate, and how easy or how hard it would be to migrate, and what benefits I would get compared to my AngularJS versus Angular on Dart?
So we're talking about Angular 1.0 versus 1.2, right?
So I mean, just a couple things to think about. So Dart is still a developing standard or language. They're shooting for their 1.0, so it's a little earlier than JavaScript is. But some of the things you get out of it is since it's a typed language and you can put types on it, though they're optional. You get better syntax, highlighting command completion, figuring out where the references are. So your IDE can actually do a lot more for you. They have some benchmarks that show them actually performing very well, particularly on initial load time and then in some of the execution speed over JavaScript. But we haven't yet seen applications written in it. This is one of the things one of my other teams is working on. I've got about 60 folks who are working on a largest application for Google. So some of it's yet to be seen. But I don't know, Igor, you want to add some things?
Yeah, it's really too early to tell. Like, we are open sourcing Angular Dart just so that the community can see what is happening, what we are working on. And there are people who have been asking for Dart support for a long time. And this is our answer. Like, if you're really passionate about Dart, you can watch this project. You can contribute. It's definitely not ready to be used today. It's going to take some time. We want to build this internal application with this Angular that is evolving in Dart. And see how things work out. And once we're confident that we got the Dart implementation right, then we'll call that stable version that people can use. But with Dart itself being a moving target, it's really hard to discuss these things. Like, you really have to be a passionate developer and like bleeding edge code, and then you can look at this project. And
we'll keep you updated. Over here.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to the Angular team and just let you know how awesome I think Angular is. It's a great job. It's
Thank
fantastic.
You. Thanks for being a fan.
And my question is, so if you have let's say a fairly large application you've already written in Angular 1.1.4 or 1.1.6 or whatever, and you want to just throw in 1.2, is there any particular pain points or things you need to watch out for to migrate, or will it be fairly seamless, or is there anything to kind of consider?
There are a few breaking changes. We're going to document them all. We actually have been documenting these as we were making them. Probably the biggest one, if you're using $resource, the promise-based API changed few things, but it's not completely backwards and compatible. It's only particular use cases that you need to watch out for, and we'll document these. Other than that, the breaking changes have been relatively small and well documented.
Actually, let me just add something to it. 1.1.4 is essentially what will become 1.2, right? At some point, we're going to just basically say instead of 1.1, whatever, 17, we're just going to declare it 1.2. So as long as you keep up with the 1.1 releases, at some point it will magically become 1.2.
True.
Two more quick questions. I'm again bringing data into the Angular world. I'm finding myself having to, and so I'm running into that digest issue. Digest is already running, and my solution has always been to do $scope $phase to see if that digest is running, and then do an apply if I need it. And because that's the only way I can find to solve that problem. So is that the right way to do it?
No, that's the worst way you can handle a situation. And The reason why I'm laughing is because we had a really passionate discussion about this with Mishko yesterday, where I was proposing a fix for this, and he was explaining to me how stupid I was and that would never work. And can you talk to us afterwards, and just we can look at the code and just show you? But really, Mishko, do you want to summarize what we ended up
So
with?
what you're basically doing over there is, how do I even summarize this? You're setting it yourself. So let me back up a second. You have this non-angular world and you have this angular world, right? And you cross from non-angular world into the angular world by calling apply, which then internally calls a digest.
Most of the time, this happens automatically when you use like ng-click or HTTP. Like this crossing of this boundary just happens for you. You don't know about it.
Okay. And so it's very important that you keep your code always on one side of the boundary. Either it's always outside or always inside. And whenever I hear people doing something like this, what it means is that you have code that is sometimes inside and sometimes outside. And the trouble is that the rules about how the system behaves are different between those two places. And so the chances of you getting the code right in both cases is very hard. It sets you up basically for failure when it comes to testing, because your test will pretty much not work. And there's a couple of other issues with that. So,
but what should he do?
Well, so I'm of the opinion, and Igor has a slightly different opinion, is that whenever you run into this issue, it's really a sign that something is amiss in it's a programming error, really. So something somewhere made a wrong assumption, that the same piece of code cannot be running both inside and outside of Angular.
Okay, I mean, it's just when I'm calling the Facebook API and trying to bring data back.
Right, so that gives us the next point. So why do you get yourself into this trouble? And the usual answer is you're calling an API such as a Flash or third-party API such as Facebook, which doesn't follow this very simple principle that if you have an API that's async, it needs to be always async. And if it's sync, it needs to be always sync. But the Flash and it sounds like Facebook, what they sometimes do is they sometimes call you sync and sometimes call you async. And this gets you to trouble because if they call you sync and you're already in apply, then you just continue being inside of apply. But then when they call you async, then all of a sudden you're not in apply. And so it's really a third-party mistake that then gets manifested by us, and then everybody kind of points the finger to us. But we don't actually know a good way of solving this, and we're struggling with this and debating this.
Maybe catch us after.
But I'd like to see your use case. Maybe we can learn something
because
from it.
we want to see examples of this. Like we looked at several examples that people were discussing on.
I'll catch up with you later.
Okay.
Second question was about UI router state manager. Is that, I think you said that you were going to talk about it, but I don't know if you did, actually.
We did. The thing, we actually broke out our router, and we added some things to it, but it's not a state manager like the UI router is. We don't plan to introduce state-based routing into the existing router just yet. Like it's too big of a change. But by making a simple move of just taking the existing router out of the Angular core, we are preparing us for the future where we could either adopt UI router or work with the team and like rebuild something that would become part of Angular. It's a good project. So the first step is we're going to take ours out. So if you want to use that one, you're not paying the extra bytes for ours. One over here.
Hi there. I had a quick question. I love the NG animation. I want to see any support or anything in plan for HTML5, Canvas, base 64, anything in that aspect.
It's actually kind of outside the realm of Angular, I think. But Mishko might say something different.
That's.
Can you mention a particular use case?
The new animation was really great. So with that, there is a lot of things that with those animation, it would be a lot of things with the canvas, for example, that would be great. Or play base 64 animation with the images with.
So you can do animation inside canvases, and there's lots of great libraries for that you could use with Angular. But Angular is about manipulating DOM. And Canvas is a big area that you can manipulate inside the DOM as kind of a way to punch a hole in it.
A lot of HTML5 object, not just the canvas. That was an example.
Oh, yeah. For all the HTML5 DOM components, like all of the animation stuff applies.
So what you can do is Angular works on a concept of adding or removing a class, and the class may trigger animation. But in your case, what you can do is you can actually take advantage of the polyfill. So for example, in the browsers that don't have CSS animations, adding or removing class is a no op, but you can register a JavaScript function which gets triggered when this class gets added, and then you can use that to execute any JavaScript you want, including canvas animation.
For sure. Over here.
Yeah, there was a lot of new features that were introduced tonight, and so I guess I had a question. It's a A and a B. So the A part is, are you guys affiliated with the battering like Chrome extension? And if so, is there any like new changes coming to that?
So yes. So Brian Ford. Joining us on Monday.
Brian Ford
wrote Batarang.
Batarang was Brian's intern project for last summer. He was my intern last summer, and during the summer internship, he developed Batarang. And then he continued working on it during the school year. He finished his school, and he's coming, as I mentioned, next week. So this is definitely something that we're interested in supporting, and it's just going to be part of Angular going forward.
Are you looking for something particular? Just more better.
More better.
Okay, you got it. We will more better it. Over here.
Do you have any prescriptive guidance for using Angular in real-time application scenarios?
Maybe Mishko.
You mean like Scikit.io?
Well, any kind of app where there are multiple users simultaneously, and there's a lot of visualization going on, real-time updates across browsers.
So there have been a couple of demos where you could use Socket.io, and essentially you just have to wrap any event that the underlying layer provides you for real time. You just have to wrap in the $ apply, and then you could just have essentially kind of shared canvas. What was it?
Firebase.
Firebase is a database that's real time, and they actually already provide a API to Angular, which essentially creates synced objects across multiple browsers. So you get a different, you get the same object basically, multiple users, and then as you modify that object from any location, it gets synced across to the other browsers as well.
So also, Jeff Cross running the video board tonight, but his day job is working on Angular. He's actually thinking about this in the future of Angular. Maybe grab him after we're closed up here.
Yeah. And if you're looking for a particular application that already uses this stuff, Plunker is built with Angular, and it has a collaborative feature which is based on WebSockets and stuff, and they do most of the stuff that you mentioned already.
One last one over here, and then we'll call it quits.
Yeah, this is a pretty specific request. In directives, would it be possible to pass a function to template URL, like have some logic behind?
Done.
It's already done, isn't it?
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, we didn't mention it. It's part of 1.2. This is like there are many things that we didn't have time to mention. Yeah.
Oh, okay. One more.
So thank you for all the work on Angular. We are really enjoying it after a lot of hair-pulling experiences as we got started with it. But one question that I have for you or for Igor, I know you posted something on Angular gesture directive that somebody had written on your Is that what the ng animate is based off of, or is it totally different? I know that's written on Hammer.js. And
so the Hammer.js wrapper for Angular was written by a guy who works for Volkswagen. Okay. And it's not affiliated with Angular. It's not what we've based our touch support on. Hammer.js is a great library, and if you can't wait for the rest of our touch-based stuff, it's a good option. But we're actually building the touch-based pieces into the core of Angular.
We started evaluating it. We have.
Yeah, cool. All right, everybody, thank you so much. If you haven't signed if you actually asked a question and haven't signed a release, please see Christine in the back. We'll be around for a little while later, and feel free to come up and chat with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.